Well, good morning, everybody. And although I'm here to introduce somebody who's worked his life with elephants, I'm nevertheless going to start in my usual way by bringing the voice of the chimpanzee into this room, because I always do. And if I don't, somebody says, but you didn't greet us in chimpanzee language. So here we go. And that is a message to everyone speaking today who's going to talk about their animal, to start off by bringing their animal's voice into the room, and that includes Iain. He's shaking his head. Well, I just asked Iain, when did we first meet? It was ages ago. It was round about 1960. I don't know, 65, something like that. Anyway, it was an awful long time ago. And Iain at that time was young. He and Aurea were out there with the elephants in Manyara National Park, completely crazy, absolutely mad. Why he survived some of the things he survived, I don't know, but he did. And I went and visited, stayed with them. My son, Grub, who's here today, was about 2 years old. And Iain took me out into Manyara National Park, and he said, Jane, I hope I can introduce you to my favorite elephant, which was Virgo. And we found Virgo, and I will never, ever forget standing beside Iain and holding out my hand, and Virgo reached out and touched me with her trunk. And it was just a very, very special and amazing moment. And I discussed with Iain back then, scientists were pretty stuffy. And Iain had been told that he should give his elephants numbers. I said, Iain, that's crazy. They told me that with the chimpanzees. Chimpanzees aren't numbers. Elephants aren't numbers either. They're individuals. So we had a good discussion about that. And Iain's research was groundbreaking at the time. Nobody knew as much about the way elephants behave. But like so many of us, he'd had to turn his attention to conserving the animals that he'd been studying. We've all had to do that. If we really care, then we want to save them. And Charlie has already introduced the subject of the way that we are eliminating so many individual animals around the world. But fortunately, as Charlie again said, there are those people out there making a huge difference in their efforts to conserve and study different species. And I would say that Ian Douglas Hamilton, along with Aurea, have truly, truly made an enormous impact on elephant conservation, and that many elephants are alive who would otherwise be dead. And as we all know, out there in the field with poachers who are sometimes desperate villagers, but sometimes they are paid by international terrorist organizations. So it's dangerous and it's hard work. And I am absolutely delighted to be introducing my old friend, my friend, I better not say old friend, had I? My friend, Ian Douglas Hamilton, to start this off.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. Well, what a wonderful surprise. I didn't expect Jane here, who perpetually has a message of hope for us all. And that, together with the incredible ethos of the Wildlife Conservation Network, always makes this a special occasion. This year, it is especially special for me because my wife, Aurea, is here. We have shared so many wonderful times and terrible times together. And we do always have to keep up that hope. But now, we've had a lot of changes. I was here, I missed last year with you. So it's 2 years since I've been talking to you, and many, many things have happened that time. Now, I'm bursting to tell you everything, but I don't have the time. So I'm going to confine myself to two sad stories and two happy stories, and try to tell what's happening through those stories. My first story is about the murder of a dear friend, Wayne Lotter, in Tanzania. He wasn't well known, he's not somebody who sought the limelight, but he's one of the most effective conservationists in recent times that I've known in that country and in the elephants' range. He came from South Africa, he made friends, he saw what had to be done, and he had an incredible capacity to talk to those people who could make a change, those pockets of integrity within that country, that wonderful country, Tanzania, who would enforce the law. He was murdered a short while ago, and it serves to illustrate the dangers of the central plank of our philosophy. We're trying to stop the killing, we're trying to stop the trafficking, we're trying to stop the demand for ivory. And that central plank is the hardest and the most dangerous. But the work goes on. Conservationists take risks. We support them through our new Elephant Crisis Fund that's come a long way since I saw you 2 years ago. We've gone from $1 million to $12 million that we are dispensing entirely to other parties. WCN and we organize this together. We have a spectacular team. It includes people like Charlie and Hefe, and also Chris Thowlis, who's our sort of scientist that runs it, and even Dudu Douglas Hamilton, who does that central plank of stopping the trafficking. So the other sad story I have to tell you is closer to home. It's up in the core of our area, Samburu, where we've had the most crippling drought that has lasted for over a year. And it's been so painful to see the grass swept off the land, nothing left to eat, desperate animals, desperate wildlife, desperate people, and desperate livestock, all struggling to find the last piece of grass. We've had breakdowns of law and order where people have invaded protected areas with their livestock. The animals, the wildlife have had to run around to find what they can. And we've seen starving waterbuck, starving dik-diks, Grevy's zebras, impalas, even elephants, who, by the way, are very good survivors normally. And, of course, the cattle have starved. So I can now move on to the happy stories. Actually, this breakdown caused by the drought has highlighted things that we all know are happening, which is this overpowering rate of change of wild habitats. It's a 100-year-old story, but it's one of these awful exponential curves that it gets worse as time goes by. And we've had a complete change in the ratio of livestock to people, so there aren't enough livestock left to feed people who depend on them, and change is needed. Now, the good story is that just before the end of the rains, we teamed together with, under the leadership of Belinda of the Grevy's Zebra Trust, and we started feeding some hay to these starving animals. And so they got something just to bide them by. And 2 days ago, I got a message from my daughter Saba, who's out there running the elephant watch camp, to say that the rains had broken. So, so let's get another 10 days and a covering of grass, and whatever has lived through that period, we can stop the feeding, and those animals will definitely get better. Now, my other happy story. Where's my notes? So, the other happy story is from the other side of the world. It's China. I don't know who of you were here when our young scientist Reson Kantai addressed this and said, China, why vilify a whole nation? Because it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from people like us to say, well, China's the problem, China's the villain, and so on. But actually, China's done a 160-degree change in their policy towards elephants and ivory. And it has to be partly because of the fusion of goodwill that came from places like this, where we lobbied people. We used Chinese celebrities to spread the message, the great Yao Ming, the beautiful Li Bingbing, and it got through to the leadership. I think America played a great role in talking at the highest diplomatic levels, the presidential level, at Secretary of State level. How it must have seemed then that every time we meet the Americans, they want to talk about elephants. Anyway, it worked. China changed their policy. And China have now become the leading voice at CITES for complete eradication of the ivory trade with tiny... I would say there's much more than that too. We have a Chinese railway that's been built in Kenya that has carved right through the middle of the largest elephant population living in the Tsavo National Park. Recently, a year ago, we got permission to radio track the elephants to see if this indeed was going to destroy the connectivity of the two sides. Well, it didn't. The Chinese built magnificent overpasses and underpasses. And today, that is working. So we're completely on top of that, and just a bit of planning now, and the elephants be okay. An unexpected thing that happened was that illegal settlement erupted along the line of the railway, and these underpasses in many places were closed off. So again, it comes back down to important community relations. Now, I'm not taking everything on myself. Our CEO, Frank, is going to speak next, and then Bernard, who represents the community. But I have to say that since Frank came on board, we acquired not only a CEO, but someone who's a magnificent wordsmith. He was a journalist before, writing for the Times of London, and he's a great leader. So we're very, very happy to have him. He's also my son-in-law. So Frank is going to talk about another aspect that I don't have time to go into in great detail. We are doing so many things. I do hope you can read our reports. If you're on our mailing list, you'll get everything. We've got our Elephant Crisis Fund alone has got 163 projects in 53 partners in 31 countries. And neither WCN nor we take a penny from that. It goes 100% to the other partners that we support, who are usually NGOs, may even be governments. And so our project that we're very keen on now is this high-tech radio tracking of elephants, because it's giving us huge insights back to what Jane referred to, our first love, animal behavior, but also protecting elephants and also showing a route to the future. So, Frank.
Wow, how nice to see so many friendly faces, and yeah, wonderful to be here. I've got a very short amount of time, and I want to tell you one story, picking up from what Jane was saying about the importance of understanding these creatures as individuals. Because animals surely are individuals. They are as individual as you and I. And we can talk in generalities about elephants, but if we ignore the fact that they're individuals, we do so at our peril, and we ignore their essence. They're as individual as you or I. Elephants are actually very similar to all of us in terms of the length of the life they lead, the fact they have big brains, intensely social lives, they mature at about the same age as we do, and they learn through the generations. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. Now, when I started with Save the Elephants in 2015, having evolved from a previous life in the ocean, I remember one of the first things I said to Iain was like, and I think WCN was saying the same, Iain, there are a few too many maps in your talks. Okay? Iain is very map heavy. He thinks cartographically. And I'm going to break that rule because pretty much all I'm going to show you today is maps. I hope you'll find them as interesting as we do. So I'm going to talk today about this elephant here. This is an ID photo, so sorry about the quality. She's a young elephant born in 2004 called Orchid. And she's from a family in Samburu called the Flowers. And as Jane said, well, following now, I know it was your inspiration, Jane, the elephants in Samburu are not given code names, they're given names like you or I. And because elephants live in female-led family groups, we give them names, thematic names for those groups. So we have the Spices, the Clouds, even the Spice Girls, the Storms, and we have the Flowers. So Orchid was born in 2004, and she was led by a great matriarch called Maua, which is the Swahili for flower. And here is Maua, and we recognize the elephants as individuals by the sort of holes and the tears in their ears and the shape of their tusks. And as they get older, they get easier to differentiate, and you can see some of the tears in Maua's left ear there. Some of our more experienced field researchers have evolved beyond that very simple kind of let's draw someone's face to recognize them, and actually recognize them as individuals just from the way they walk or the silhouettes they have, and so on, just like you or I might recognize a person. So Maua was an interesting elephant. She had this range here. Now we're looking sort of westwards over Samburu and Buffalo Springs National Reserves in northern Kenya. And this blue spaghetti is Maua's tracks over 10 years where we followed her between 2003 and 2013. Samburu, which is here, it's only about 100 square miles, just over 100 square miles. So we're talking quite a small range. Anyway, in April 2014, she wandered down to the extreme southeast, near to the biggest town in the north, which is called Isiolo. And it's a sort of very Star Wars town, very mixed, very kind of a crazy, intense place, and unfortunately home to ivory traffickers, the sort of outer tendrils of the ivory trade. And this road here snakes all the way up to Ethiopia, and little motorbike drivers were coming up and down that road, commissioning ivory poachers. And sure enough, on the 25th of April, she was killed at that spot. And there she was. So Orchid was 10 years old, and she was left an orphan. And thanks to Singer, is Singer here? Singer Rankin? Yay! Singer's World Women Work sponsored a study that we've been doing for 2 years now to look at the fate of these orphans. So we've been tracking 10 orphans that were left in similar situations and who have had to forge a new path in life in the absence of their mother. Now, Orchid was lucky because she had an elder sister named Desert Rose, who turned out to have a new strategy for Orchid. So Orchid, through being tracked, started to show us how a new matriarch like Desert Rose could show Orchid new ways to survive. So if we look at, this is Maua's range when she was alive, and then look at what Orchid started doing when she was under new leadership. She started moving east into this Shaba National Reserve, and then even further east into some of the worst badlands that we have in terms of elephant poaching. What was she doing? Why did Desert Rose feel more comfortable over there when we know that elephants are extremely sensitive to risk? It's a bit of a mystery. The movements of elephants like Desert Rose and Orchid into these dangerous areas are in fact very useful for us, because now that we know we're going there, we can help protect them when they get there. So we have about 50 sentinel elephants like Orchid across the northern range. And those elephants' movements are fed into the control center of the Northern Rangelands Trust, who run ranger response units, rapid response units, who can then react to these movements and say, Orchid's moving into that area, other elephants are moving to that area, they're being driven down there, let's get a patrol on the ground to protect them. And like that, these 50 or so elephants are able to protect or help improve the fortunes of more than 6,000 elephants that live in that ecosystem. It's a very powerful tool that we've now built into a piece of software called the Domain Awareness System with Vulcan, who are based in Seattle. And we're now rolling that out in protected areas across Africa. And it's early days, but we've got high hopes that as part of a suite of other solutions, this will improve the fate of elephants. And these are the kind of rangers that are being empowered by this technology. They're able to work much more efficiently and effectively. So now I want to show you an extraordinary thing that Orchid did in June this year. So presumably under the leadership of Desert Rose, we didn't manage to confirm this, but presumably under her leadership, Orchid took off from Shaba, and she started moving rapidly eastwards. So she's now out into a very dangerous area. She's moving out, and she's into an area that she's never been before, as far as we know, from our tracks of her mother. She's looping around farmland that is around this area. Mount Kenya's in the distance here. She's covering about 70 miles in a week. And she's moving, she seems to be following a pretty straight path. Is she following a map in her head? How is she guiding herself? Has she been there before? We don't really know. But what's interesting is right here. She suddenly hits an obstacle. She hits a fence that's been built to protect the community. You can see the farmland here, being to protect the community from the elephants that live inside Meru National Park. She's racing up and down. You can see the panic in her movements. She's moving fast. She knows she wants to get through. Something is pulling her through there, but she's not able to get through until she finally, she tries one more time, and then she finally gets up to the far end, and you'll see her, she finds her way through. And then finally her desire is sated. So she only needed to go a little bit away. And then she gets into the heart of Meru National Park, gets by the river, and she's arrived. Now, these kind of movements are showing us the paths that elephants want in order to link these key habitats. So we know her mother liked Samburu National Reserve, and then we know that other elephants like Meru. But as the population of Africa increases, the latest projections are that the 1.2 billion people that live in Africa now will be 4 billion by 2100. And that's not population alone, that comes with infrastructure, and infrastructure is going to slice across this landscape. Here's Orchid's track. This is the streak she did. There's Mount Kenya in the distance. Now, there's a huge Chinese Africa-wide infrastructure project called the Great Africa Land Bridge that's supposed to link East and West Africa. It's a road, rail, and road and rail network, and then other bits of infrastructure along. It slices straight through this ecosystem. That is the projected path. You can see it sort of severs it up. But all is not lost, because we can't lie in front of those bulldozers, but we can build infrastructure to allow elephants to continue. And this is an example from northern Kenya that actually works. It's expensive. That's the only downside. So we need to know exactly where to build these crossing points. So here's a brand new analysis just done. I won't try and explain how it's created, but it's based on network theory that connects different pixels and the shortest route between different pixels. And you can see here that it picks out the tracks that elephants use like arteries across the landscape. And we can see here we're already engaged with the community in protecting these crucial corridors between these national reserves here, but you can see the wealth of other connections across the ecosystem. Now, there are actually not many arteries there that we need to protect. If we can protect them, then we can join up this landscape, and we can have an Africa that is not only developed, but also has its ecosystem intact. For that to happen, we need the help of the Samburu. Because the landscape that you saw orchids streaking through there, those are community lands. Even the national reserves, those are community reserves. The Samburu have evolved as a culture, evolved with the elephants. They're the reason, their nomadic lifestyle and their dependence only on the blood and milk of the livestock that they live with, that tolerance of living with wildlife and not hunting the wildlife is one of the reasons that Africa has the greatest diversity of large mammals on the planet. They are a key to the future, but they also face many challenges. And I'd like to now hand over to Bernard Lesirin from Elephant Watch Camp, one of our great partners at Save the Elephants. Bernard knows at least, I think Bernard knows about as many people in this room as I do, because so many people have been to Elephant Watch Camp. Anyway.
I know quite a lot of people. Habari zenu? Salama, that's it. We are a big waving nation in Kenya. You might have seen on the streets, little kids, Jambo, and bye. Yeah. What a journey this has been for me. Coming to the United States for the very first time. But I promise you, I've never traveled this many miles to address a mammoth crowd as this. So I am Bernard Lesirin. I grew up in the wild north of Samburu. Beautiful landscape, beautiful mountains, rolling hills, valleys, and vast wilderness. Growing up in Samburu, as a baby, I've always had a fascination for wildlife. Because we live with wildlife. I have vivid memories of me and my little friends running around naked after squirrels around the bomas, because we wanted to play with them, but of course the squirrels had their own agenda. But I must say, what was even more fascinating were stories from my mother. She used to tell me about elephants migrating through the land. And as young boys, we are tasked with herding livestock, and we follow the warriors during their escapades and endeavors with their cattle. And so they establish cattle camps, and we follow them. We would see elephants in the distance. They're very scary and very wild. But what do? We have to learn from them. We have to learn how to avoid elephants. We have to learn how to use local knowledge to protect ourselves from predators and all that. I remember watching scorpions creep out of the little holes with babies on their backs. And sometimes we would sit on tortoises because we believe if you sit on a tortoise, you're not going to pee in your bed at night. So I work at Elephant Watch, which is based in Samburu, and it's our conservation-focused safari. How I got involved with Elephant Watch is very interesting. It's through something that is totally unrelated. Basketball. Now, if you come from San Francisco, you probably don't know much about this. You have to go to Oakland. So I hurt my arm playing basketball. And one of the guys who helped me or trying to fix my arm was an elephant scholar. So for me, that was interesting. And I asked how. And he said, come to Samburu Reserve and you will see it for yourself. And so I did. He introduced me to Dr. Shivani Bala, without the doctor part, back then, who then introduced me to the Douglas Hamiltons. And I went there and I stayed in the research camp with all the researchers. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Sitting in the back of a Land Rover for a year, studying my elephants, drawing their ear patterns and all that. And you're surrounded with elephants, so you don't even know who to draw, who has pushed who, and you have to know every detail about that elephant, their family structures, their relationships. But I did. And I must say, that was a year well spent. Now, I can recognize nearly 400 elephants. I know a couple of people have been to Elephant Watch. You've taught me so much. In as much as you come there, you think you learn. Yes, of course you do, but I learn a lot from you. So sometimes, sitting back in Samburu, I feel like I've traveled the world by just talking to you. And you tell me stories of environmental catastrophes across the world, things that I would not read, because sometimes we don't even get the newspaper until 3 months later. Of heart-rending tales of local populations and endemic species disappearing at an alarming rate. What do we know about this? You're experiencing crazy things. We all are. The hurricanes, the wildfires, the tsunamis. At this point, I would like to say pole sana to those people from Sinoma. I know what you went through. I just want to say my heart goes out to you. Pole sana, I know there are people here that you might have lost family or friends or properties, and a few people who've been evacuated. And you had so many places to go today, but you chose to come here. That means there's a connection. There is a connection for a bigger cause. I know that as Frank was telling you earlier, he was describing these interesting connectivities and poaching. It's not just that, but also the destruction of ecosystems, the loss of habitats, the landscape. It's bleeding. What is happening now is that this vegetation is disappearing, nutrients, the soil is losing its nutrients, degradation, and the whole landscape is turning into a desert. In Samburu, more like the Great Dust Bowl you suffered almost 100 years ago. If we don't do something, we will eventually get there. And when the land turns into a desert, we will lose everything, including the local knowledge, and our traditions will be gone anyway. It will be gone with it. It's very encouraging for me to see young kids who want to participate in this, who want to make a change. I'm very proud to stand here today and say that at Elephant Watch Camp, together with Save the Elephants, we've done our little bit. Through our scholarship program, we've managed to trigger a little bit of change in our backyard. We have students who've come through the scholarship programs, and now they're doctors. Others are big entrepreneurs, and the whole point is to create ambassadors. At the heart of this, because we need change. In as much as there is, because right now there are too many people, too many livestock, too many bad decisions. At the heart of this, we need to change. There is a better way. We cannot be victims of circumstance here. We can learn. We can teach our children. We can teach our brothers and sisters that there is a better way, and we can change. Ian Douglas Hamilton has revealed so much about, or he has done a lot in terms of elephant research. But it's been Aurea, Ian Douglas Hamilton's wife, who has had that matriarchal instinct to teach us and the children of Samburu to change. She's shown us the way. And as a result of that, we've learned so much. Sometimes in camp, they say, I'm an ambassador. Well, I don't know about that. But certainly, I am an ambassador by taking insights back to my people. So I'm an interface. And without just going back to what Frank was saying about the little orphan elephant orchid and all the movement that she did and all that, and how she decided to adopt and things like that. We need to do things like that. We need to adapt. We need to change. And if I could borrow from words from your former president, Barack Obama, we are the change we need. We are the change we need. It's in us. I would like now to welcome Aurea Douglas Hamilton. Just before she comes to the stage, I just want you to know that if we put all our energies together, our hearts and minds and energy, we can achieve great. We can achieve great things, and we can make the world a better place. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bernard.
All right.